Hello and welcome to the National Press Club and to another edition of the Kalb Report, a public policy forum that is co-sponsored by the George Washington University, the National Press Club, and the Shorenstein Center on the Press, Politics, and Public Policy at Harvard's Kennedy School of Government. I'm Marvin Kalb, a senior fellow at the Shorenstein Center. This year we are discussing two deceptively simple questions. What is journalism and who is a journalist? We are supported by Bloomberg News and by the Ethics and Excellence in Journalism Foundation. We're being carried live by XM Satellite Radio nationwide and by WMAL here in Washington. And we're also being taped for later use on PBS Channel 32 by Bloomberg and by other stations as well. Our guest today is Tom Curley. He is president and CEO of the Associated Press, a job he has held for a little more than 2 years after working for 31 years for the Gannett newspaper chain, which owns USA Today, the newspaper with the largest circulation in the United States. He was president and publisher of USA Today before coming over to the AP. It is probably no exaggeration to say that the AP is the most influential news organization in this country. Indeed, it has been called the world's news service. It is a multimedia company whose copy influences news and reporting everywhere. It was founded, believe it or not, in 1848. It has a budget of $650 million. It is a wire service. In addition, it feeds television and radio and is now all over the web. Tom Curley, you have a big job and a big responsibility, and it's a pleasure to welcome you back to another edition of the Kalb Report. I'd like to start, before I even get to my first question, to ask you, because you've got this fantastic job, all of this responsibility at a time when journalism itself, writ large, is in trouble. Who is Tom Curley? Where do you come from? Where did you go to school? How'd you get interested in journalism?
Well, I got interested in a way that many of us do, and the ego took over. I started when I was 15, and I was supposed to call in the score to the local newspaper at the end of a basketball game. And one guy threw a basket from one end of the court to the other, and it went in.
And scored.
I called the sports editor and told him, and he said, "Hey, kid, can you write?" And I strung together the longest amount of cliches in the history of the English language. They didn't change one word, and I had an 8-column banner headline, and here I am today. So it's all about bylines, and it's all about ego.
What state are you from?
Pennsylvania.
Mm-hmm. Pennsylvania do something special for you?
Well,
would it have made any difference if you came from Maryland?
Well, we're pretty proud in Pennsylvania, but I'm not too far from Maryland tonight, so there's no reason to insult anyone. But I went to school in Philadelphia at LaSalle and got a master's in business administration from Rochester Institute of Technology. Started as an intern in 1967, and we were talking about this a little bit before the program began, but one of the first jobs I had was covering the obituaries of the U.S. servicemen who were killed in Vietnam. And so that war has been a defining moment for many of us of a certain generation, including me.
Tom, you will agree that journalism is having its difficulty in recent years. And so I'm wondering, since this question comes up time and again in classrooms, what is journalism these days? Well,
disseminating the news. And the news is what's new. And I don't think much has changed on that.
But the technology, is somebody, for example, from Middle America who is a blogger who claims to be a journalist, the same as your White House correspondent, for example, who both disseminate information?
Well, of course not, but I will say that at AP we favor the broadest definition of what is a journalist. And the reason we do that is because as we have operated around the world under a number of circumstances, we have encountered people who have provided us information, critical information. Initially, people we talked to in the course of trying to find out what really happened in some distant place, and then eventually perhaps they became stringers and then perhaps part of our AP staff over a period of time. So when we go into a place where we have to expand, and Iraq is another current important example, we have added a lot of staff. We've trained the staff. We think we've created a very good team over there. But many of them started as drivers, aides, what have you. Even though they had training and skills in other places, they began to apply them as journalists.
So the idea of having to go to a journalism school is not that important to you?
Well, I don't want to insult all the journalism schools of the world tonight. I did not go to one. My wife did, and she's sure I should have gone. But what you have to do is get experience. There's no question. If you're in television, you have to get experience. If you're in newspapers, you have to get clips. You need to get on camera. You need to write. You need to engage in those functions. You need to be out there asking the tough questions.
Is it enough then to sit at home? My friend in Middle America, who was the blogger, who claims to be the journalist, he or she has never, in my scenario, covered City Hall, never covered a war, never covered a campaign, but feels absolutely comfortable sitting there writing whatever he or she thinks about the president right now or Putin in Russia. And somehow or another, don't we all ascribe to these people a kind of legitimacy that normally we would have reserved for people who had covered City Hall and a war and a campaign?
Well, let's deconstruct a little bit. There's
Okay.
a lot of blogging going on, and if you were to pick up a newspaper, there are a lot of different pieces of a newspaper. Some of it is service. Here's the listings. Some of it is opinion. Some of it is perspective. Some of it is the latest news in brief. Some of it is very impressive graphics, and there's all that. A number of people out there who are not normally employed by the traditional journalism organizations have these skills. They can do graphs, they can take pictures, and they probably have a great deal of training in some of the subjects about which they're blogging. Those people add, I think, to the conversation, and they offer us a lot of opportunity. And the big opportunity for legacy media, as they're called, the traditional media, is to link to them and redefine a sense of community in an interactive, ongoing way. So I think that's an important point of view. There are a lot of people who are just putting their opinions out there. How much value do they have? How good's the opinion? How good's the idea? The United States, famously, is a place about ideas. So there is a place for them.
Do you agree with the point that I was making before that journalism these days is in trouble?
Actually, I do not at all.
Okay, tell me why it's doing well then.
I can only infer, and I was going to throw a question back at you, do you mean about some of the stories that people have had to...
Well, I mean, we know. I mean, the New York Times with Jason Blair, the New York Times today with Judith Miller, CBS with Dan Rather. I mean, I could go on. The USA Today, your newspaper, had a similar journalistic scandal a year ago, and a major reporter had to be let go. And you had a big shakeup at the very top. Now that would suggest to me trouble.
There have been issues over a number of years that have affected a number of the top organizations. I do not think that journalism is in trouble. I think journalism is at a very important moment. And one of the messages that I have for the Associated Press people is that the world needs the AP now more than ever. In a world of blogging, in a world of many new voices, you need a standard bearer. And that's the role that AP has provided, one of trust. And we don't go with a story until it's verified.
How many newspapers does the AP service?
Well, in the United States, 1,500, another 1,000 overseas. Generally, our material can be seen by more than 1 billion people a day.
Wow. That includes the television, the radio, what's on the web?
Well, we have 60% of the world's video news as well.
60%? What does that mean of the world's video?
Well, of the raw footage you see, for instance, the dramatic explosions yesterday from Baghdad, which, by the way, was where our people were, all that was AP video. So a lot of the backdrop to the video news that you'll see on television is AP produced. The original news pictures from around the world, video news pictures, are AP.
You're raising an interesting question. If the AP provides 60%, when we are looking at television news in the evening or in the morning, and we see a news story, would you expect, if it's AP footage, to have some indication on what it is that I am watching, that it is AP footage? Or do you just sell it and that's the end of it?
We would like to get credit. A number of our contracts call for us to get credit, but the fact is we often don't get credit.
Because the question in my mind is, I'm not worried about an AP cameraman taking a photograph or taking pictures of an important event, such as the bombing of the Palestine Hotel in Baghdad. But supposing it is a cameraman who was part of the political process of the country in which the picture was being taken. For example, supposing it is an activist Sunni insurgent shooting the footage in a way as to amplify his particular point of view. Doesn't that raise a question sometimes, if there is no ID when you're looking at pictures, about who shot it? How legitimate is this picture?
Well, it was interesting in the aftermath of the Jason Blair episode. There was a period of time where people tended to give credit more than they did right before Jason Blair. I have a feeling that we've swung full circle back. We're in an era of fierce branding by the news media, and everyone is trying to maintain a position in the universe, maintain audience one way or another. So drive the brand, drive the brand, drive the brand. And so I do believe that trust would be improved if there were more disclosure, and I think that's one of the issues that we must work on.
Okay. That leads to my question. We used to have a lot of afternoon papers in the U.S., and then the afternoon papers went the way of all flesh. They all died, and your former competitor, the United Press International, died along with them. And I think there might be a relationship between the two.
That's right.
And I'm wondering, what is the Associated Press doing now to make certain that that kind of fate does not await it?
Well, we have a number of programs, but there is a lot of competition out there. I want to assure people from the start, the most direct competitor is Reuters.
But that's a British news service.
Well,
Is there an American news service that is there in competition with the AP?
The New York Times, of course, sells its material and is widely used. Washington Post makes its content available, and others in the United States do as well. You have Bloomberg on financial. ESPN has become formidable in sports and so forth. So it's gone not just by general news, but if you look again at news in its different forms, you can see within each niche. Even on the entertainment side, there's a whole industry that's formed there with special photographers that just sell pictures of the starlet's latest rings and things like that.
So tell me, where is, you mentioned some of them before, but give me some more detail. Where is the competition coming from now for the Associated Press?
Well, again, the most direct competitor is Reuters,
Okay.
and which outside the United States is quite strong. Has a very strong base in Europe, to be sure, and is half the size of AP. Reuters Media is half the size of AP. So
How many people work for the AP?
4,000, 3,000 of whom are journalists.
And who are the other 1,000?
Well, it takes somebody to support journalists, so communications people,
Oh,
very
okay.
sophisticated.
Okay. And
moving
Reuters, you think, what, 2,000 people?
I think they're a little less.
A little
by
less
now.
than that? And what about AFP? Or what about TASS, for example, the Russian TASS news agency?
Well, they're still state subsidized, and actually AFP is state subsidized too.
So you're talking about non-state subsidized
That's right.
wire services.
That's right.
Okay. Now,
And only Reuters and AP have the video service as well, the television video.
Now, when you mentioned the New York Times before and the Washington Post sending its stuff out on the wires, they don't do television, though, do they? Maybe they do. The New York Times, the Post?
Not breaking news and not to any large degree. everyone is getting into television, however.
So tell me, how does it work? Let's say you're in the Moscow bureau, and you are a reporter, and you have to cover the story. Putin is saying something, there's an economic problem. How do you get the footage? Do you have an extra person doing the shooting?
Actually, we have a dedicated staff of several hundred. We have 98 television bureaus around the world. We have more than an extra person in Moscow. We have several extra people as a result. And it's a very aggressive, hard-hitting television group led by a senior producer. And so in all the major areas of the world, we are in place. And the way you get any of these big stories, as you well remember, often is to anticipate where the story is going to break. And so if you're a news agency, to try to be one step ahead, where is the next big story going to occur, to make sure that you have cameras, reporters in position in advance.
Where is the next big story going to break?
Let's not go there.
Where would you like to have a bureau that you don't now?
Well, there are three places on Earth that we would like to have bureaus that we don't. Iran, Saudi Arabia, and North Korea. And we are working very hard in all instances and hope to have some progress even before the end of this year.
You said a month ago, as the audience turns to new platforms and adopts new habits, the news must follow, unquote, and you launched ASAP, as soon as possible, a news wire service providing content for young people aged 18 to 34. The person in charge, identified I think as Ted Anthony, is a 30-something journalist who says, and this sort of caught my eye, who says young people are looking for news and information on their terms with form, function, and sharp writing. What's he talking about?
Well, that's right. I think the analogy that I would make to a certain audience is that in the transition from radio to television, we initially took the old form radio and tried to put it on television, and then we got smarter about it. And so the efforts to reach young people in the past have gone very much with a very traditional format, a very traditional approach. ASAP is a serious effort to go beyond, to begin with a digital publishing model, if you will. Reverse publishing is what we call it, publish first for the web, different graphic format, different ways to access, interactive, the opportunity for the readers to comment, global, instantly, and with a point of view that's very different from the way we normally process stories at the Associated Press.
I was with you until you said with a point of view. What does that mean?
Well, the way the stories are described, so and presented. Heavy on graphics, not so long, more on entertainment and sports, but a solid news content as well. Trying to
solid news content that has entertainment and sports. Entertainment
content areas in addition. We're not trying to entertainmentize the news. I didn't mean to suggest that.
It's quite a verb you got there.
Well, and let's not use it again, so how's that? But to present content that's appealing to that age group.
You have to help me understand that a little better. I mean, I would say that news is news, and that you, if you're a good writer, you will generally get somebody to read your copy. If you're a lousy writer, you probably won't. And, I mean, for example, would you have as slow as possible news for people my age, as opposed to as fast as possible for the young people?
Well, actually, that's an excellent point. And it really shows that it's not about age altogether, is it? Because there are certain people who really want to access this type of content. But the biggest difference in age is what people are interested in, what subjects they're interested in. There are certain bands that you probably aren't interested in.
I agree.
And there are certain types of entertainment. There are certain restaurants that you probably would not go to that other people are interested in. So it's a way of presenting the news, that targets the content interest for a group that's younger. But if you're a certain type of person who's forever young, you'll be interested and go there. And we're already seeing that.
You're already seeing that you've gone beyond age 34.
That's right, and we're fine with that.
So then what was the whole point of this? That you were trying to get more people to watch or listen or read Associated Press copy. And you were making an assumption then that younger people are going to want their news packaged in a different way.
That's exactly right. And to make a pretty strong statement with a very strong financial commitment and a significantly sized staff to go after all that and try to pull that off. This is a new generation of news consumers. They don't consume the news the way you and I do. They're not used to sitting down with appointment media, a 6:30 p.m. national television news broadcast or a newspaper delivered at 6:30 a.m. They're used to getting their news all day, sometimes in snippets, usually freed from their original containers, such as the newscasts, such as the newspapers. And so they're used to picking and choosing. ASAP is designed so that they can pick and choose and quickly leap through, do self-editing, if you will, choose the content that they want. They're very accustomed to being able to reach out and go after that content that they want.
Tom, give me an example, please, of a major story that you're covering for the Associated Press and that you're covering for ASAP. AP.
The big one, of course, is the earthquake in Pakistan, which has resulted in...
How would that be done?
Well, we have a journalist over there who covered Katrina and is now over in Pakistan, in some ways comparing and in some ways describing what he saw in both places. He's also blogging himself, so he is producing certain stories in the way that you would consider the norm, good copy, trying to tell a story in a way that attracts people, but he's also publishing snippets and paragraphs and impressions from what he sees from place to place. So it's a different form and a different style, and that's being packaged with a number of our pictures and graphics as it normally would be, but in other cases it's just presented on ASAP in a busier way, much more being packed onto a page. Again,
I'm being dense, and I
ask you a pardon. Let's go to the World
But what do you
Series.
mean by a busier page?
Well, more
pictures
elements.
all over it?
Yes, in different, well,
But
not
I mean,
all
you'll
over.
have pictures, large copy, big headlines. What's the difference between that and sensational journalism then?
The underlying content is hardly sensational, and the headlines aren't that big, and it's not. It's to be informed, up-to-date graphics, but still accessible and easy to get into and move around. Let's do it on the World Series. That's another one.
Okay.
I think we both probably could understand that. We have a terrific sports columnist, Jim Litke, who normally would file a column after a game.
Okay.
He is blogging. He is sending out paragraphs during the game and making those available.
Okay.
So that is different.
So he's doing commentary along the way.
That's right. And he normally does commentary at the end, but he might talk about an incident, an umpire's call during the game. So why wait 3 or 4 hours until the game ends?
Okay.
Who's to say that we need to wait? And the same way from Pakistan. File 1 story a day in the old system, or maybe 2 stories. Why wait? Get something out. I saw this. It won't make the main bar, it won't make the big story, but it's interesting. It had appeal. Put that out there. Publish that.
Are you not laying too much on the reporter? Are you not laying on his or her shoulders responsibilities that might, if they go after all of that, all of those opportunities, might have the effect of reducing the quality of what it is that is being presented, simply because there's not enough time? How do you get the time to check, to be sure that you're doing the right thing?
Well, you ask a couple of questions, so
Yeah.
let's take them. So I think we're talking about stories that are huge,
Okay.
in this case, and you need extra coverage resources. I think it would be wrong to send one reporter to an area such as Pakistan where the devastation was so large and so many people died, and expect that person to provide video, audio, short form print, long form print, and perspective. That's nuts. Nobody could sustain that. That's not what we're trying to do. You take a story such as Pakistan, we have producers there, we have television people, we have a number of journalists in place providing reports. So you're spinning off someone to report, in effect, for the ASAP service. You're having someone report the short form, the breaking news as fast as possible, and you are trying to provide some perspective on the relief efforts and what's happened to the people and make some sense out of a tragedy so large.
Do you have to be under 30 to provide copy for ASAP?
No, but we have a number who are, and of course, that's helpful.
Well, I think a lot of them will be in this room, would be quite interested to know that. You also, I understand, will reach into the public on occasion and try to get help directly from people who might have seen an event. And I know that you brought a tape here that we can look at, in fact, play. And because we are being heard on radio, I'd like to be able to play this tape and then have you comment upon what it is that we're looking and why we're looking at this tape to begin with. So here we go.
Everything on this tape has been contributed by citizens. And the first picture up is from the Oklahoma bombing. This, of course, is the Concorde crash in France, World Trade Center 9/11. Again, everything here is from citizens. Another picture from 9/11. The shuttle blow up over Texas. And the London subway bombing in July. And here is now the video of the tsunami wave as it comes ashore. So when we talk about citizen journalism and the ability, one of the things we're seeing here is a change in the technology where people have access to devices that are not quite network quality, whether it's still or video cameras, but who can shed important perspective for all of us on these events. And here is my favorite, which is a silly car crash in London. And in seconds, you'll see there are about a dozen people who show up and start taking pictures with their telephones. And so everybody seems to have one of these now, and everybody can contribute. And so that's what's going on out there, and it obviously doesn't cost a lot of money. The cell phone pictures are not of the highest quality, for those of you who have not tried to take one yet, but the rest of you already know that. But that's what's going on there. So we have access to this type of content. Now, what's important here is that once that content is gathered, is gotten by the Associated Press, two things happen. A senior photo editor can now edit and add value the way he or she has done every day. And then also we have this rather remarkable distribution system that enables us to get it out. If you wait for it to show on the internet, I think all of us have had the experience of a joke that shows up a year after the first time you saw that joke. So sometimes it moves fast on the internet and sometimes it doesn't, but we still have an instant distribution system and all this can work. So that's how we look at it, as a way to reach out, take advantage of the new technology that is increasingly is in consumers' hands, and get us content that we otherwise wouldn't have.
Do you also reach out to people for editorial content? In other words, is the AP making a determined, a serious effort to try to get the average citizen and to get his, her views to you, so that, or observations, to get those observations into the copy? Is there any effort like that?
There are some small efforts, and our efforts are quite limited. We sell to other news organizations primarily, so a number of the things, we're doing that with ASAP, and we're taking the interactive content there. We're doing it as part of the blogs that we're setting up with the Pakistan coverage, with the World Series and things like that. But so far for us, it's limited. It's not a full-blown effort. We're looking at some possibilities there, but nothing major right now.
Tom, have you seen any difference in the in the business success that the citizen journalist can provide? In other words, is that kind of journalism making your product better so that you can sell it more effectively?
Well,
Any impact of that sort?
One of the things that AP offers with its global distribution and its global presence is the ability to go into remote places and get pictures, to get stories out very quickly, often almost instantly. So one of the things that's happened, I think, to the journalists of the world and the stringers, the biggest impact may be on the photo side. The quality of photo images is far higher than it was 5 years ago. And I would say that 5 years ago you could easily tell the difference between a good photographer and another photographer. Today, because of the quality of the equipment, it's harder. And the photographers would have to go through more assignments before it would be immediately available. But yes, we're trying to put more cameras in the hands of more people, including AP staff, to train AP staff to be able to do that, but also to train them to go out and acquire this. And I've said to the staff, no one will ever be fired for spending too much trying to get hold of important pictures or video.
But will anybody be fired if he or she were to say to you or to the bureau chief, look, I've got this important story that I've got to write. I can't go out and take pictures for you. I'm not really a cameraman. I'm a reporter, and I have to sit here and spend the whole day thinking about what I'm going to write. Now, you wouldn't fire somebody like that, would you?
Absolutely not.
Good, I'm glad to hear that. I want that on the record. I want that on the record.
But what is amazing is how many are willing to embrace the new media and actually want the training, who want to come forward and learn how to gather the news in this forum. I have been surprised. People are there, and let's face it, there are a whole lot of people of a certain age who want to market themselves for the new era, who want to develop those skills.
That's true.
And want to show that. So this is part of the new journalism, and they want to participate. And basically, as you said earlier, journalism is about the art of telling the story, and there's more than one way to do it.
Now, I must assume that one reason you were offered the job of president of the Associated Press was that you had business experience at USA Today. You proved that you could turn a profit. And one question is, for me and a lot of other people, how much of a profit? What I'm getting at here is that a lot of news organizations earn percentages that go over 20% in profit in a year, sometimes 30. I know local television stations, for example, earn profits in the 40 percentile. That's a lot of money each year. And the cash cow idea comes into play here when you begin to think about different ways in which modern journalism functions. And so the question that I have for you is, do you feel that there ought to be a ceiling on the profit that could be made by a news organization, or is there no ceiling at all?
No, and I don't think that's the way to look at it. I've always thought that quality in the United States was a determinant and an opportunity, and if you satisfied the consumer, whether it's a news consumer or a consumer of another product, on a quality dimension, that you had a sustainable future. Now, the conversation now has to do with what's happened, and I think there are two issues. One of them is very direct to media, and that is the rise of the internet access superpowers, Google, Yahoo, Microsoft, and to some extent AOL. And so the economics are shifting. The larger problem that I think most organizations in the United States are dealing with is the benefit issue, pensions and medical costs, trying to raise revenues enough to cover the costs of the employee base. And it's not an issue that is fully understood. It has shocked me that it has not yet really entered political campaigns. But it's very difficult to imagine.
Political, in terms of covering this issue?
Well, politicians figuring out that this is an issue. It's a jobs issue. If we're to get serious job growth in the United States, we're going to have to deal with this issue of pensions and benefits. One of the ways that you're seeing this being played out is some of the old industries, airlines and steel, are just throwing their pensions onto the federal government and the shoulders of the American taxpayers. And there has been little pushback so far yet on this subject. But in terms of job growth and the long-term impact here in the United States, that's a very, very serious issue that businesses in many fields have to address. So that issue, and that is a very important issue for the media that you describe in terms of trying to get the revenue to grow in this era when there is new and emerging competition and when they have to make a shift to new products that reach this new generation of consumers, it becomes a battle to find the resources to do that.
But at the end of the day, if you choose to tell us, what, for example, is the profit margin at the Associated Press?
In 2004, we effectively almost broke even. The wire service business has been historically a break-even business. And 2005 will be better than that just because there's no Olympics and presidential election. So
your expenses went
down. And
right.
As I tell the board, you can look a little smarter in odd-numbered years and a little stupider than you might otherwise appear in even-numbered years, and it has more to do with elections and Olympics and next year the World Cup soccer. So these are coverage expenses that we have to bear, and we don't jack the rates too much in those years.
Can you tell us, for example, what the profit margin was in your last years at USA Today?
I cannot. I, of course, know it.
All right.
But
can you imagine a day when a publisher of a major newspaper, such as USA Today, would stand up before the board of the stockholders and say, look, this year we're going to take a 15%, that's the ceiling, 15% profit. Everything above that is going to be reinvested to improve what it is that we've got, to make this product of journalism better, higher quality, better people doing it, reaching out to the youth who aren't reading as much as they should. Can you imagine that happening?
Yes, I can, and I think it's a conversation that should be held if someone can complete the sentence. Namely. And the second part of the sentence is, and if we do that, we'll be better off in the marketplace for these reasons, and it probably will lead to higher profits, a stronger competitive position, and an enduring franchise. And just to walk in and say, by God, if we add 20 people for young readers or whatever the project is, don't know if it'll make it or not, but we all feel good about it, that's not going to fly these days. The times are too tough for that. But if you say, look, this is what we need to do, we're going to invest. Our board, the AP board, just approved last week some higher than normal spending to update our technology infrastructure over the next 2 years. We made a case, we had to make a solid case, and I think the fact that they approved it suggests that we did. There's a reason for it. At the end of it, we'll be faster, we'll be more efficient, we'll get our content out in a way that will serve our customers better. You have to be able to do that. And one of the things I'm telling my people and others with whom I speak in the industry is you have to push to those specifics. What really does make a difference, what really does add readers or viewers. And these days, in most places, newspapers or wherever, television stations, the audiences have fallen to the point where there's 50% of the market that's not being served. So a new product initiative may indeed reach out. And so these are the things we really must be doing. We must be trying innovation.
You mentioned Google before. Profits, I read the other day, rose 7-fold at Google. But at Dow Jones, which owns the Wall Street Journal, profits in the third quarter of the year dipped 19%. And my eyes popped when I read the following day that New York Times profits for the third quarter dipped 52%. How do you read those numbers? What are those numbers saying to us?
Well, first of all, Google does have some content online. It does not have many people going to it really for content online. This is something else. It's about access to the internet, and it's about a word most of us can't spell, which is algorithms. That's a couple steps away from the core content business. Dow Jones, I think, does deserve credit because it did stand up, to your point, and say, we want to start a weekend journal. So it did invest, and the only way to do that is to spend tens of millions of dollars for a period of time to find that market and to get that market. So I think they made some choices. Specifically at the New York Times, they're going to maintain their quality no matter what. They're not going to cut to the bone. They have, and I think I would point out just in the last 2 weeks that the New York Times has stayed with that Pakistan story and pushed it on the front page. And they deserve more credit than they are getting in terms of their dedication to news in this era, at a time when so many others are pushing more toward short-term commercial gains. The New York Times has stood true to its news principles here and plays the hard stories. And for it, it's a wonderful business opportunity, and they see it as that by being very true to hard news.
Isn't it a shame then that we read so many stories now about how awful the New York Times is and how awful some of its reporters are? And I'm talking obviously about Judith Miller and this alleged CIA leak story. How do you read the trouble at the Times now? If you don't like the word trouble, use some other word.
Yeah, I must say, there are some issues where within hours of having a special prosecutor release a report, so I'm going to step lightly through the tulips, and let me say two things. Number one, we still need a federal shield law. Let's not lose sight of that, regardless of what happens or what might turn out to be. Why do we need it? Why do we need it? Because of the way it works here. Information is provided us, and we need to be able to protect those sources. And it is nuts to see reporters going to jail for upholding professional standards the way clergy, the medical community, and the legal community have the same standards. So we're not asking for an exception that's just for us. We're asking for an exception that already exists in 37 states, the District of Columbia, and actually is almost common law in the United States. We need it at the federal level. And the other thing is that if there is a problem at the New York Times as a result of this story, they will fix it. You can bet on that, and I have full confidence. So no one sets standards any higher, and they will be very aggressive about any follow-up that turns out to be necessary.
Tom, do you think that what's happening at the Times could happen at the AP?
Anything can happen, and you would be foolish to try to show some false bravado by saying it couldn't happen here. These things happen. I can tell you that I was with the international desk yesterday after the attacks on the Palestine hotel, and there were a number of instances during the day where, as it turns out, since our people were pinned down and we were trying to take care of the wounded and assess the situation within the hotel, that we did fall behind the story for a few minutes at a time in terms of the number of people killed and things like that. And a number of times an editor said, we don't know that, even though others were reporting it, or several others at one point were reporting the number of dead, and we didn't know, and we held back, for a period of time, let's say 30 minutes, until we could confirm that. And that really is what you need to do. You have to have the courage to hold. And if you're going to maintain the standards, that has to be a part of every day's effort. And you see that at the AP, and I'm very proud that people are willing to hold, even though our job is to file as quickly as possible.
When you use the right word, I think, too. I think it takes a great deal of courage when you see the competition reporting on a breaking story and you're holding back, because you want to be absolutely sure that when you report, what you report is accurate. And that does take courage, and it's very admirable. And I wonder how widespread it is in the industry today, but however it be. But you were saying you were with the international desk. Judy Miller at the Times was working with a Washington bureau chief, editors in New York, the top editor in New York. How would you, as the president of the AP, if something similar were happening at the AP, physically you can't be everywhere. So on whom do you depend? And you're going to tell me the editors. But how are you sure, Times has editors too, how are you sure that they're going to do the right thing? Or can you never be sure?
Well, I think you can be sure of the people you select, and you see them tested every day. So what happens in the system is the times when people aren't looking, something can happen. The times when something is not elevated, you're at most at risk. But for us, the news report, the daily news report, is supervised by the managing editor, and I have tremendous faith in him. And just working with the various department heads, whether it's sports or entertainment, with the national desk or international, and just seeing the way people parse words, and do we know that? One of the great things about the AP is that there is a lot of peer editing. So if we're at an event together and I'm writing the story, the main story, and you're there for color, you're there for quotes, or you're there for a column, you would read over my story before I released it to the desk. So we have two sets of APIs at the same event. And then as soon as the event is over or it's done, we hit the send key, and that goes to the desk, and somebody has to react pretty quickly, let's say within 7 minutes, to move the story. But if somebody's not comfortable, we won't, and we'll hold. We do all the time. The truth is we get a lot of stories out. But what you learn to do is write what you know, and it's the choice of words, and it's the attribution. And for us, it helps to be as transparent as possible. So we're informing the rest of the world's media who our sources are and what we know and why. So we're reviewed, too, by these thousands of media outlets every day on just about every story, and we hear back.
Do you have special rules on anonymous sources?
We certainly do. And
what are they?
A couple of the most important are that the source has to be in a position to know. And when we have found mistakes, it's turned out that the source was not in a position to know. And all of us who have been reporters know what that means. And when we've been burned, that's usually the case. And the other is that an editor has to know. And the reporter has to share that knowledge with a supervisory editor.
You mean for every anonymous quote, for every background quote, the reporter must inform the editor?
That's right.
Okay, okay. Now, this is sort of philosophical.
We also, on the AP Wire, the word anonymous shows in chartreuse. It pops right out there. So if anybody is allergic to that word, and any editor across the country is wanting to be sure that there are as few anonymous sources in a story as possible, it jumps right out at you. So it's there for everybody to see. So we're calling attention to this.
A philosophical question, which we've talked about it even recently. Judy Miller has defended her reporting on weapons of mass destruction by saying, my sources were wrong, and therefore my story was wrong. Anything wrong with that?
Yeah, well, if your sources are wrong, and there are several sources, and they're all very highly placed, it is certainly possible for any number of journalists, not just Judy Miller, but any of us, to go with that story.
And to get it wrong.
And to get it wrong. And I think a number of us probably have been in that situation before.
And are you finding that copy at the AP is being, if I'm using this verb right, being lawyered more than usual?
Definitely not.
Definitely not? Because a lot of news organizations now have lawyers who look over any, I don't mean questionable, but any story that might be controversial. They sort of make sure before they publish or broadcast that a lawyer has looked at it?
There are certain types of stories that need to be reviewed, and I don't think that has been expanded in recent years, frankly. I think the lawyers are more involved on the anonymous sources and some of these situations where people want access to our notes or our images. So the run-ins with authority trying to take shortcuts to get at information is probably an area that has involved lawyers. Also, things are posted on the internet. We go there, get that information, make it a part of a story, and then somebody sues us for getting the information in the wrong way, even though it was public. So there's an emerging area in which we have needed some additional legal assistance, but the core day-to-day stories, I have not seen an expansion in recent years on that.
Tom, you were talking before about Iraq and the explosions at the Palestine Hotel. And a lot of the reading that I've done about reporting by American news organizations out of Iraq runs up against the same problem. It doesn't matter whether it's AP or CBS. It is that it is incredibly dangerous for American reporters working in Iraq, and a number of them have been killed. So a number of reporters have been killed. So you end up depending upon stringers or local people you feel more comfortable sending out of the hotel, the Palestine Hotel, to go up to the northern part, the Kurdish areas, to go into the south. Do you have a problem with this? Is there not a danger that those people are not as well trained as you would imagine most AP reporters are?
Well, first of all, a number of AP reporters still go out. Now, obviously, we're in a bit of a lockdown after the attack on the hotel, and let me do 15 seconds to describe what happened. A suicide bomber came up to the bomb blast wall, detonated, and blew a hole in the bomb blast wall. A second truck came into the square across the way and detonated and caused a lot of injuries to civilians, which was the plan, and caused the distraction. And then a concrete mixer truck went through the hole in the blast wall and got stuck in the debris and from the first blast and the barbed wire, but got inside the blast wall by about 15 feet and ultimately was stopped by an Army soldier who fired heavy machine guns and caused the detonation at some distance to the hotel. And then a fourth truck was coming in to also go to the hotel, and that person was caught and shot, and that bomb did not go off. So it was rather sophisticated in its timing and dramatic in the scope. The cement mixer was loaded, had a big payload. The fourth thing that didn't go off, a dump truck, had a lot to it. So that's an indication of the extent to which people will go to target a hotel that is principally filled with journalists. So
that may be a reason to get out of the hotel.
Well, we're obviously looking at options, but the other side of it is the defense is held. We had injuries, but...
Did AP reporters, AP personnel get hurt?
Yes, we had 3 people injured, none seriously.
But what about the stringer problem? Because a number of newspapers have written about it, reporters have written about it, and I have in mind both news stories and parts of books written by Post reporters, a marvelous series of pieces done by a New York Times reporter. The question that they raise is that they can't go out because New York, Washington stops them. It's too dangerous. Do you have any rules of that sort? Is it each guy makes up his own mind?
No. We have a senior correspondent in charge over there who served 4 years in the U.S. Army during Vietnam. He is very good. He's not a cowboy. He doesn't allow people to take unnecessary risks. There are a number of times when we go out, and there are times when we cannot go out, when the situation is such, the chaos has been so ugly.
So you have to depend then on the Iraqi stringer who goes out.
That's right, that's right. Now,
do you tell your reader that this is, do you have the byline is your major figure there, the AP reporter, or do you tell your readers that this information was accumulated by an Iraqi stringer for the AP?
We'll give bylines to those who deserve the byline, and if the stringer has contributed a little, then it's a contributing line. If it's done by the senior correspondent, then he would get the byline. But if somebody's gone out and a local staff has done the full story, that's his or her byline. Now, I will tell you that a lot of these folks are trained, and our international crew works at finding people who have these skills, who have committed journalism in one form or another, in one place or another, and are out there and frequently have had years of experience. Our top television producer over there is BBC trained. So we do have expertise, and we do have people out there trying to provide the most complete report.
Tom, we've only got a couple of minutes left. I'm wondering, what is the best advice that you could pass on to a student, some right here in this audience, to a student who is thinking about going into journalism? With all of the negative stuff kicking around about journalism, is it still a profession that you, with a clean conscience and a good heart, could recommend they do?
Well, I obviously would enthusiastically. We need you. We need you more than ever, and your opportunity to do some good has never been greater. So the two things I would say are get the experience, get the clips, do the writing, do the production, do whatever it is that you want to go into, get the airtime, learn how to ask the questions. It would be helpful if you develop some expertise in a particular area. Let your heart and mind wander to the areas that most interest you, that are around the passion that you might have for a particular subject, but go after that, develop that. That kind of devotion, that kind of extra information is the kind of thing that someone will find appealing and will eagerly bring you on staff and give you a try.
What about language?
It's the gateway to a job. And I would say look at the 4 major languages of the world and try to learn at least the second. So Arabic, Mandarin, Spanish, English. It would be good to learn Mandarin. It would be good to learn Arabic. These are languages that can guarantee you a job and a career, and there are other languages as well. We need those.
Tom Curley, I want to thank you very much because our time is up. Thanks so much for coming back, being such a wonderful guest for the Kalb Report. We appreciate it very much indeed. I also want to thank Bloomberg News and the Ethics and Excellence in Journalism Foundation for supporting this series. I want to thank XM Satellite Radio, WMAL Radio, PBS Channel 32. Most important, I want to thank our audience of students and faculty and journalists who are here. Thank you all for being here. And with Tom Curley, the president of the Associated Press, I'm Marvin Kalb. Good night and good luck.